We left off last time starting our conversation about the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle, also known as. Okay, um, we have to remember that in order for a cell, any cell, specifically a muscle fiber, to participate in the citric acid cycle, oxygen must be present. You'll remember glycolysis. We said glycolysis happens. It's not that it's oxygen dependent. It's going to happen with or without any amount of oxygen. Whereas the citric acid cycle must have oxygen. Excuse me. We said that the complex set of chemical reactions will happen in the matrix of the mitochondria. The glycolysis happened in the cytosol. The citric acid cycle will occur in the mitochondria in these spaces. I don't know if you can see my little cursor, but in these they look like little lakes, right? These little blue area. These are what we refer to, this is what we refer to as the matrix, this space between the folds, and these are the folds, right? The membrane is folded, that's the cristae. The pyruvic acid is used to form several things. Well, the first question is, where did the pyruvic acid come from? The right answer is going to be glycolysis, right? That's why that's the first step. What we're going to notice as we go from glycolysis to the citric acid cycle to the Krebs cycle, citric acid cycle to the electron transport system is each step makes what's necessary for the next set of chemical reactions. What I mean by that is the citric acid cycle must have pyruvic acid for it to happen. Well, golly, isn't that wonderful? Glycolysis will supply the skeletal muscle fiber with the pyruvic acid necessary. Pyruvic acid is going to be formed in the cytosol. That pyruvic acid will then move into the mitochondrion. There, the chemical reactions that form the citric acid cycle will occur. Well, what's going to be formed through these chemical reactions? 4 molecules of carbon dioxide, 2 molecules of ATP. Now remember, there may be more ATP formed, but this is our net gain. This is what we have to put in the bank. Okay, think about it. I know for my paycheck, right? I'm going to make $100 a week, but I have to pay $20 for my health insurance. Okay, so do I have $100 to put in the bank account? No. $20 has got to pay some things, right? So that's taken out first. I then have $80 to put in the savings account. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, this 2 ATP is what's left over for us to save. And here again, the molecules that are needed for the electron transport system. I know other instructors in anatomy and physiology. I know other instructors in other biology courses that require you to know the exact molecular names of what's happening in the citric acid cycle and the molecules that are going to the electron transport system. I'm not too terribly concerned about that because, quite honestly, you're going to forget them 5 minutes after the exam. I know I did. What I want you to understand is the concepts, right? So, glycolysis, we're getting pyruvic acid. We need the pyruvic acid to enter the citric acid cycle. We go through the citric acid cycle, we get 4 molecules of carbon dioxide, 2 molecules of ATP to store, and whatever molecules that we're going to need to go on to the next step, which is the electron transport system. Again, the electron transport system is going to happen in the mitochondria. Oxygen is required. Again, I wish I could make it flash, neon spotlight, do something really, really fancy to get your attention on this because it is crucial that you see that for the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle and the electron transport system, oxygen must be present. And it's going to happen in the mitochondria. The reactions for the electron transport system takes place in the cristae, those folds of the membrane. That's where we're going to find the enzymes necessary for these chemical reactions. Going way back, what makes up our plasma membrane? Phospholipid bilayer, as well as proteins. There were lots of different jobs of the proteins. One specific job was as enzymes, and those enzymes that we need for the electron transport system are located in only one place, and that is in the membranous folds, the cristae, inside of a mitochondria. Well, what do we get from an electron transport system? I often ask students, is 2 ATP a lot or a little? Well, actually, Professor Kelly, I have no idea. Well, the way I look at it is none of us really do, but 2 ATP is better than none, right? If I said, do you want me to give you $2 or no dollars? You're not going to say, well, $2, that's not a whole lot. You can keep that $2. No, you're going to take that $2, right? No question about it. Same with ATP. Is 2 ATP a lot or a little? Well, I don't really know. Well, here comes your answer. When we look at the electron transport system, that's going to make available to the cell 34 ATP molecules. So when you look at it, 2 ATP is not a whole lot. Well, then why do we bother going through glycolysis and the citric acid cycle? Because the only way to get to the big money, the only way to get to the electron transport system is to first go through a glycolysis, make pyruvic acid. Take that pyruvic acid, go through the citric acid cycle, take the molecules that we formed from the citric acid cycle and run them through the electron transport system. That's how we get the 34 ATP. We're also going to have 2 carbon dioxide molecules and 6 water molecules. So we said we wanted to, the ultimate goal here was to completely break down glucose to carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. And there you go, right? There are the 3 players that we were most interested in. Now, your body is not always going to be operating aerobically, right? You'll see it says low or no oxygen. Now, no, your body is not going to be operating under no oxygen. If you have no oxygen, you will die. It's that simple, right? For the reasons we're talking about. You can't produce ATP. If you can't produce ATP, your cells can't do work. However, your body certainly does work in low oxygen conditions. And not anything weird or on top of a mountain or underwater. No, simply exercising. Strenuous exercise can cause your body to go into low oxygen conditions or operate anaerobically. Go for a run. What's the first thing that happens? You start panting like a dog. That's because you're trying to bring more and more oxygen in. And typically, most of us, myself included, are not able to get enough oxygen in. So we end up operating, your muscles end up operating under anaerobic conditions. So what does that mean? Well, glycolysis is going to happen because, as we said, glycolysis happens. Glucose cannot be broken down any further than pyruvic acid without oxygen, right? Pyruvic acid is going to be formed through glycolysis. Glycolysis is not oxygen dependent. The other two is, right? The other two are, excuse me. So you're going to get glycolysis, but you cannot go any further. You're not going to get the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle and the electron transport system. Pyruvic acid molecules are converted to lactic acid. Hopefully, lactic acid is going to ping something in your brain and make you go, oh, I've heard of lactic acid. What does lactic acid cause in your body? Give you a hint. Okay, these anaerobic conditions that we talk about occurs under strenuous activity. And you'll remember, I use running as an example, but for some of us, myself in years past, walking up a flight of stairs was strenuous activity. I started panting like a dog, okay? Lactic acid is what builds up in your body when you are exercising, right? When you're strenuously exercising. And if it's not taken care of, if it's not broken down, it can lead to cramping in your muscles. This occurs under low oxygen conditions. What happens with aerobic conditions, with oxygen? Sitting in a chair, lying on your bed, listening to this lecture, you are operating under aerobic conditions. Unless, of course, you're listening to this on the treadmill at the gym, then you're over in anaerobic, okay? Aerobic conditions of pyruvic acid enters the mitochondria. Hopefully you're getting that when we talk about anaerobic or aerobic conditions, glycolysis is not included in this. Why isn't glycolysis included in this? Because it is not oxygen dependent. It's going to happen with or without oxygen. Under aerobic condition, when there's plenty of oxygen, pyruvic acid is going to enter the mitochondria. And that's where we're going to finish. This really should probably say we're going to finish the complete breakdown of glucose because we've already started it. Glycolysis starts that breakdown of glucose by breaking it in half to 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. All right, but we're going to finish it off in the mitochondria once the pyruvic acid enters, and it's going to include, these aerobic conditions include the citric acid cycle and the electron transport system. In order to completely break down glucose, we need all 3 sets of chemical reactions: glycolysis, citric acid cycle, and the electron transport system. So let's look at the total energy production. We're going to look side by side, whoopsie daisy, anaerobic and aerobic conditions. What we have to remember, and this is really important, we're starting off with the same raw material, right? We're starting at the same spot. Everybody, aerobic, anaerobic, doesn't matter. We're starting off with glucose. What do we end up with? All right, so anaerobically, we end up with 2 ATP. Where are those 2 ATP molecules coming from? The only chemical reactions that are going to happen under anaerobic conditions will be glycolysis, and glycolysis gives us a net 2 ATP. We're also going to end up with 2 lactic acid molecules that over time build up, as you can imagine, fairly quickly and can cause cramping in your muscles. Now we look aerobically, we end up with 38 ATP. Now, wait a minute, Professor Kelly. You didn't say 38 anywhere. You're 100% right, I didn't, but let's add them up. We have 2 from glycolysis. We have 2 from the citric acid cycle for 4, right? 2 plus 2 is 4. Then we have 34 from the electron transport system. 4 plus 34 gives us our grand total of 38 ATP molecules. I'm not being a smart aleck. We just have to follow where they're all coming from so you don't just have this number pop up and go, I don't know where she's getting that from. We're adding up the ATP formed by our 3 sets of chemical reactions. We're also going to end up with 6 water molecules and 6 carbon dioxide molecules. Very clear, but the question is, which is a better energetic bet? Which gets you more bang for your buck, if you will? All right, and that's the bottom line. We're starting at the same point. We're starting with glucose. Where do we get more of what we need? Well, what do we need? ATP. Well, again, you want $38, you want $2. I wouldn't mind $2, but if you got 38 to give me, I'm going with the 38. So obviously, aerobically is the better energetic bet. You're going to get more energy bang for your buck, for your glucose buck. Now, we have to look at changes that happen in homeostasis caused by muscle use. Lots of things happen when you use your muscles. Think about going for a run, thinking about walking up the stairs, walking into the kitchen to get a bowl of ice cream, right? Those muscles start working. There are many, many changes in your body. There's going to be a temperature increase. Your heart rate increases. Your respiratory rate increases. Well, why? What about using your muscles will cause that? You really have all of those answers already, but let's talk about them. We're going to see something called oxygen debt. When you are in debt, what are you? You owe somebody something, typically money, right? In this case, your body owes itself oxygen. Well, what do you mean by that? During exercise, muscles need large amounts of oxygen. We know now why they need large amounts of oxygen. Because in order to get as much ATP from a glucose molecule, we need plenty of oxygen so we can get those 38 ATP molecules instead of just those 2 from anaerobic. So we need plenty of oxygen so that we can run the mitochondria and get that ATP. Under low oxygen conditions, again, through strenuous activity, only glycolysis is used because there's not enough oxygen to run the citric acid cycle and the electron transport system. Pyruvic acid builds up, it's converted to lactic acid because that's what it does. Okay, that's just what your body does. Oh, we got extra lactic acid, we got extra pyruvic